I want to share some thoughts with you about the need to remember blessings which God gave you in times which you felt to be better times, when God was very real to you. Remember your lost blessings. That's what they wanted to do in the Psalms. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? Why a foreign land? Why can't we sing if we're abroad? Well, the point here is that they were in Babylon in exile, and they were looking back to the land of Israel, which God had promised them, and they felt that that was where they had met God, and where God had been real to them. And now they were somewhere else, in a different place. You may be in a different place or a different time. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? And the psalm goes on to say, if I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you. The point about Jerusalem, of course, is that is where the temple was. That was where God spoke to people. That was where God was experienced, where God was present, where you felt you were near to God and God was near to you. And now they were in Babylon. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, let my right hand wither. So I'm going to give you a personal example from my own experience in the hope that my testimony may be a blessing to you. And we're going to go back to Kent and Sussex in the first half or so of the 1970s. My wife and I, although we weren't married at the time, but my wife and I worshipped at Maranatha. That's that large house, belonged to a doctor, and on the back there was quite a large room built that was used as a meeting place. And there we worshipped with a group of Christians who had been exclusive brethren, and they'd left the exclusive brethren but retained the depth and seriousness of the faith which that had given them. There you see some of the people that we worshipped with. You see Ted Robinson and Mrs. Anderson. We used to have Sunday lunch together and we would talk about the Lord and pray. You see Rosemary and Alan Dolding, and they had a farm cottage. He was a farm labourer, and they lived in Frittenden, and we used to go down to Frittenden and have Bible studies, and again, lovely, warm, spiritual fellowship. Maranatha. God was there. And there were conventions. For example, Norman Beaton, whom you see in the photograph, would preach, and you see a website link there if you want to hear some of his sermons. And there would be about an hour of singing, fervent, ardent singing, always of Wesley's hymns. And then there'd be an hour or more of preaching, and you'd come away nourished and inspired and uplifted. They were times when God was blessing. And I went to France and was invited, among other things, to preach at that gypsy camp which you see at Bretonneux. And I went to Switzerland and open-air meetings. Here you see one in the town of Couvet. I went in the summer with a group which a French-speaking pastor called Villidreau had arranged. I was preaching in quite a lot of churches in the area of Kent and Sussex at that time, and I remember places where you would go in and there was that warm, welcoming atmosphere, but not just human. It felt as if God was there. I remember this strict Baptist chapel at Sutton-at-Hone, always a place to look forward to going to preach, because of the warmth of the fellowship there. We'd have to drive up the appropriately named Death Hill in order to get there from where we were living, and then, of course, back down Death Hill on the way back, and we'd have to negotiate the traffic if there was Brands Hatch racing that Sunday evening. But it was a time of felt blessing. Another such place was the Evangelical Church at Dunks Green. And there again, there was such a lovely, warm fellowship and sense of God being there, and sense of God working and meeting with people and speaking to them and touching their lives. Listen to these few words of reminiscence from a sermon I preached years later in North Wales.
That God is always displeased with you. He's always looking at you with a frown. That's why I like that verse that we read in the Psalm. The Lord takes delight in his children, but they make you feel that God never takes delight in you. There's always something wrong. You're never any good. You're never acceptable. Nothing you do is quite up to standard. And you get a picture of a sort of God sitting up there with an awful frown. I went to a church somewhere, I think it was Dunk's Green, and they had a notice outside. It was a sort of a cartoon. And up in the sky was this fierce-looking man with a beard, just throwing down lightning and thunderbolts with a great big frown. And the caption was, "Is this your God? Come and meet ours."
In 1974, my wife and I got into our little white Renault 4 and we drove down to Kosovo, which was then part of Yugoslavia. And God's hand was on that journey in so many ways. And there were providences which God arranged, which continued to have repercussions right down until 2015. I don't say it's not continuing, but certainly from 1974 to 2015 there were blessings flowing out of that visit. And I was minister of this church in Hadlow, and we had good times there. And you can get a sense of that if you listen to one or both of Norman Parker's sermons preached there. There's the website link. And you can hear the depth and the passion and the fervour of his preaching. You sense that God will speak to people and touch people and change their lives and their attitudes and their experience of faith through the preached word, through the service. Truly, these were days when God was with us, and we knew that God is real. We knew that God is real. But such times can be followed by times of dearth. Whilst I'm actually making this video, we are going through a period of lockdown or restrictions because of the coronavirus epidemic in Britain. There can be times of sickness or unemployment or bereavement or other setbacks. And there you see me in that photograph. I seem to be going away into a dry and barren place. Life can be like that. Or there can come times of spiritual dryness when you go to church and you're bored and you don't feel that God is speaking and touching your life through the service and the worship and the preaching. The preaching leaves you untouched. And you don't have that warm living fellowship and spiritual conversation with other Christians that came so spontaneously in times when God was so obviously close and alive to you. And you felt his presence and you felt his working and you saw his hand in providence. And now those spiritual blessings seem to have evaporated. And perhaps you feel like the words in this hymn, a hymn I often choose when I preach. Come, O thou traveller unknown, whom still I hold but cannot see. My company before is gone, and I am left alone with thee. And the chapel in that photograph at Frood has now been closed. So all of these circumstances, both in your life generally and in your spiritual experience and context, can lead to a sense of apathy, lassitude, inertia, listlessness in spiritual things, doubt. Is God really real? Uncertainty. And that lovely word axidy. You feel like giving up. Is it worth continuing the effort to maintain your faith, to maintain your walk with God? Well, remember the psalmist. And here is another psalm. Number 77. I consider the days of old. I remember the years long ago. And I say it is my grief that the right hand of the Most High has changed. I will call to mind the deeds of the Lord. Yea, I will remember thy wonders of old. And here are some words from a book by John Crumby Brown. Lovely old-fashioned language, but he's saying very much like I'm trying to say. No man can tell what he may be called upon to endure ere he enters on his rest. Record then now the fact that the candle of the Lord shineth in your tabernacle. If afterwards afflictions should befall you, recall these, the days of the Lord's right hand. And I remember those times in Kent and Sussex, and they inspire me to keep going, because I knew, and I still know, that God is real. So we come back to where we started, but here you see me coming back from that walk into a dry and barren place. I'm coming back. And this is what the psalmist said that we began with. How shall we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? If I forget you, O Jerusalem, let my right hand wither, let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth, if I do not remember you. Now, for the full sermons referred to in this short talk, you can go to that website, and you can also find there a wide range of Christian reading, listening and viewing. And if you do go to that website, I hope that you will be blessed afresh and renewed.